Welcome back to John Miller Fishing. You're not really supposed to fish when the tide's not flowing for speckled trout because they don't like to bite. And here we are. We're seeing if we can beat that rule this morning. And on top of that, it's raining. It's only supposed to be about 2/10 of a foot of tide. So it's not going to be much tidal, but there can be some water moving just through differential behind these floodgates and flood walls. So wish us luck. Yeah, so which one?
What would you recommend?
I think I'm just gonna go with,
I've got an olive like that.
well, you know, I could do that one, or these two, those are both yours. Remember those?
Yeah.
I might also try this Twitchbait, this big, you want one of those? Yeah. Oh, did I drop it? Here we have two baits, both intended to be retrieved and worked with a kind of jerking, intermittent action. Jerkbait, Twitchbait, or maybe this is the Twitchbait, and this is a subbait, subwalk, maybe this is a slash bait or a rip bait. Maybe we should call this bait a shimmy bait because when it falls through the water, it shimmies as it falls. I just want to talk about a trip I had recently where there was a distinct performance difference between two types of bait. And I can't even get there because the industry doesn't agree on what the names of these categories are. And as a communicator, how am I supposed to talk about these baits? This category of bait did distinctively better on this winter date than this category of bait. There we go. There we go.
Got something on it. Cool.
It's a good fish too. This thing's fighting hard. Oh yeah.
Oh, nice trout.
Beautiful trout.
Ready.
Beautiful fish.
Perfect
Good 16 inches. Fat. And he embedded the hook pretty good in that subwalk. Rapala subwalk. I think this is an 010 or 9. That's an 09. Looks like a mullet. I'm just going to take the liberty to name these categories. I'm going to call these lipless types Twitchbaits. And I'm going to name these lipped, long, slender, lipped baits as jerkbaits. It would also be nice to be able to talk about this group of baits as one category, because these are much different than, say, a crankbait. So if we use the natural organism system of naming, which is like a family, a genus, a species, kind of in that order, all the hard baits should be a family. So that should include baits like this, crankbaits, topwater baits, kind of dog, walk the dog baits. That should all be a family. And then underneath that would be a genus. And in the genus, these baits would be together. And I'm just going to call those the spasmodic baits, because that is a perfect description of how these are intended to be fished. The behavior of these baits when you work them as intended. They're very spasmodic in their motion, and that's for both of these types of bait. And then below that, we could talk about species. So the Twitchbait would be its own species, and a jerkbait would be another species. And these would have branched off significantly from crankbaits back up one level, because there would be a genus called crankbaits, which crankbaits are intended to be cast and retrieved more or less in a continuous fashion, which is very different than these spaz baits, if you want to call them that. So that's my definition, and I just want to get to talking about a particular day of fishing I had recently where it did make a difference whether we were fishing twitch baits or jerk baits. There's one. There's one.
I love it. Cool. That's fun.
Yeah. Quite as big as the other one, but
No, but
nice fish nonetheless. So why am I picking jerkbait for the lipped type of lure and twitchbait for the non-lipped type of spaz bait? And that's because simply I'm just choosing based on the words. In my mind, those two words, jerk and twitch, have a different energy meaning associated with them. The jerk is a higher energy action than a twitch. And that fits very well with these baits because the jerk bait with this lip, it really needs more power. Typically fish it with more power, with stronger jerks or stronger actions than you would with a twitch bait, because a twitch bait, there's very little resistance. You can see the profile of this bait would slice through the water very well. There's one.
Oh, sweet. Nice.
This is
that one was close too, John.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd like to get some more like that first one, but one of the reasons that this whole naming thing is so complicated is that the manufacturers don't really agree on these species names. For instance, if I go to the Mirrorlure site and I type in jerkbait, I get nothing. Apparently, Mirrorlure does not sell jerkbaits, even though if I type in mirror lip, I get this thing called a suspending crankbait, which for all functional purposes is basically just a jerkbait. It's the same as an X-Wrap. It looks a lot like an X-Wrap, a Rapala X-Wrap. But if I come over here and I search for Twitchbait, I get 239 products. So for Mirrorlure, Twitchbait is a well-used category name. Now, if I come over to Rapala, and so for instance, I will go to Rapala lures by type, and you'll see that jerkbaits is an actual category for them. They've got 30 baits in here, and a lot of the ones that I use. But you will also see that the Subwalk, which I just showed you because I was fishing that bait in this particular trip, they're talking, they refer to that as a jerkbait, as well as the twitching mullet and the twitching minnow, which is also one of my favorite baits, my favorite twitch baits. And if you look in many, if you go to the Rapala, like the tips, the pro tips videos, I have seen numerous videos where the pro is retrieving or fishing with a jerkbait by Rapala standards, but he's calling it a Twitchbait. So if I go to the Rapala website and I search for Twitchbait, it gives me an X-Rap, which is, by my definition, the definition I want to use, it's a jerkbait. It doesn't even give me any lipless baits. So on this day, we are fishing on a flat along the MRGO, and this is in water from 4 to 6 feet. It's kind of what we were drifting back and forth in. And this particular, the water temperature was in the low 60s or around 60, and that's a good condition to find fish up on a flat. And it was also on a day that was very rainy, and so given the bad conditions, there was very few boats out there, and at least first thing in the morning during the rain while we were there, and that made the fishing on the flat a lot better as well, because there was much less pressure, and those flats are sensitive to pressure, especially for larger fish. But we fished both jerkbaits and we fished twitchbaits, and the twitchbaits definitely outperform the jerkbaits.
I think I've been snapping it pretty hard this morning.
Ready?
That time I was snapping kind of easy.
Okay. Yeah, so that's interesting. You put on that twitch bait,
Yeah.
like second, third cast, and you got a fish. Nice fish. Oh yeah.
David was fishing jerkbaits alongside of me while I was fishing the subwalk and another twitching minnow bait, the twitch baits, and he was getting very few strikes on his bait. He switched to this Miralore Catch 5, which is a chunky bait. This is a 3/4 ounce. This is a big, heavy bait. He immediately got action. Within 1 or 2 casts, he was catching trout, and nice sized trout on this big bait. And to me, that is one of the distinguishing features of the large twitch baits that make them effective in the wintertime. They're a big-bodied, I like these big-bodied twitch baits because they are a good approximation of the bait that we were seeing in the water on that flat in that morning. We were seeing mullet, and the mullet I was seeing, I think, were actually larger than these baits, but still, it was similar in shape and size to what the bait that we were seeing in the water. And we were catching nice fish from 14 to up to 20 inches on these big baits. We weren't catching smaller ones, and I think that they were there as well, but we were probably somewhat selectively catching the larger fish because we were using larger baits.
This is a nice fish here.
Yep.
Oh man,
God,
this is a big one. Dang. Woo!
Beautiful. That looks like a solid 19 fat as can be. Be careful, don't pick me up. What a gorgeous trout.
Wow. Beautiful. Yep. Beautiful fish. I think I'm gonna let him go.
Oh, absolutely.
even though I was working this subwalk very hard, very fast, with short pauses, it still is not going to be as loud in the water as a lipped jerkbait, because a lipped jerkbait, with its the resistance of the lip and it's flashing around, there's a lot more disturbance in the water caused by this bait. And in the wintertime, I don't think that's an advantage. And that, in my experience, this type of twitch bait lure is more effective in the wintertime than the jerkbait type. And that could include, like this is a husky jerk from Rapala, or the X-Rap, even the larger X-Raps. I just don't find as effective. What I do find very effective is like this Paul Brown Fat Boy, or the Paul Brown Soft Dine. These lures I find very effective in the wintertime as well. And it's not that I have to fish them slow. I mean, these can be fished very effectively slow. It doesn't mean that that's the appropriate way for any particular day. And in fact, on this day, it wasn't. They wanted a little bit faster action.
I kind of slowed it down. My back started hurting. I might have been going too slow. They weren't interested in slow.
So that one hit it fast?
Yep.
Retrieving fast?
I was running it, hitting it fast.
Oh.
Nice fish, fat fish.
With this profile of the twitch bait, of the lipless bait, the profile that they need in order to get it to dance around when you relieve slack, or even when you jerk it, it'll dance around. They need this type of profile on the bait versus a long and skinny one. And so that gives you a bigger bodied bait, and while not being extremely noisy, which I think the noisiness is not an advantage in the winter, because all of the fish, including the speckled trout, including the bait, metabolism is all lower than it would be in the middle of the summer. And so I think that's one of the reasons that I find the twitch baits to be more effective than the jerk baits in the wintertime. They somehow respond to the slower moving, quieter bait. In the summertime, I'll often throw, like this rip shad or a shadow wrap, something like that makes a lot of noise, a lot of flash, and they respond to that much better than the twitch baits. And that's been my experience with these types of lures. I love these spaz baits. They're great. They've got so much potential. They're not prescriptive like a crankbait is, where you just throw it out and you retrieve it straight in a more or less continuous fashion. These baits are designed to give the angler freedom. So you can go out on any day, you can work it fast, you can work it slow, long pause, short pause, and you can mix it all up until you find what presentation is most effective on that day and in that particular spot. Water depth, whatever it is. You may want something that sinks more if you're in deep water, like the Fat Boy, and there's other sinking twitch baits, and these will get your bait down closer to the bottom, say if you're fishing along a rock.
Keep that one if you don't mind.
Okay. Yeah, nice fish. Oh.
I have a whole video on jerk baits. that I did last year, and I'm not going to go, there's so much to talk about. I'm just going to link to that video. I don't want to go through it all in this particular way, but all of these things are hard baits. So I believe that they would all fit in the family of hard baits. Even a soft dine, which is soft, or a fat boy, which is soft, these are still hard baits in my opinion. You know, even if I take this X-Wrap and I put a strain gauge here on the side and I apply some pressure, I'm going to get a reading on that strain gauge, because, you know, hard is a relative term. Yeah, on this soft dine, I have a strain gauge on here. I'm going to get a lot bigger reading when I apply tension to it. But this bait is not, the action of this bait does not come from the deflection of its body. And that to me is the differentiation between hard baits and soft baits. This bait, this is a Matrix Mega. This bait is a soft bait. You can see that the deflection of this tail is what gives the action to this bait. So deflection is the bait. That is the action. This soft dine, even though it's soft, the deflection of its body is not what it gives it its action. This is a twitch bait, which will twitch around in the water. It will shimmy as it falls. It's soft, which could be an advantage in that when the fish bites it, it feels more natural, and maybe it won't spit the bait out quite as quick. And so that's the reason that I have these in my tackle box, because they do have that added extra benefit of the soft body. And for both the fat boy and the soft dine, I will often fish these slack lined, meaning I won't even necessarily jerk it. I'll just give it a sweep, maybe a few jerks. But what I really want is the shimmy when it falls. And I'll give it a lot of slack line when it does that, because I want it to fall in a shimmy, natural way. And that's very attractive to the fish. They'll hit it when it's falling, shimmying down. The advantage of the soft body in that case is that the fish will hold on to these baits for a long time. So that gives you plenty of time to take up the slack so that you can set the hook. And so I find it like fishing a plastic worm. Maybe not quite as extreme as that, but it's a lot like that, where I can give them plenty of slack time. They'll swim off with this bait in their mouth. They're not going to let it go because it has a very natural feel to it. So that's the story of the day. And don't forget that when you go out with these types of baits, you should be fishing them in a variety of technique, retrieve patterns until you figure out what the fish want. Do they want a rapid return with lots of hard jerks, or do they just want small twitches? And again, it doesn't matter which one of this species of baits that you use, whether it's the jerk bait or the twitch bait. You're still going to be able to adjust them to the conditions and the preferences of the fish on that day. But definitely in the wintertime, have a few of these giant bodied twitch baits in your box and pull them out, try them, because they're very effective in the wintertime. Well, thanks for watching. I appreciate everybody who is watching my videos. And if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe. It's free. And I'm going to continue to provide quality content, things that will get you thinking, things that are of interest to me. And I think fishermen are all alike. And so you're going to find it of interest as well. And so when you subscribe to my channel and you hit the bell, you're going to get notified that my videos have come out, and then the notice will be there, and you can be sure to get the content. So get out there and fish. I wish you success.